I'll probably have it after this.
Good morning.
That's like Morocco's thing.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cut the Shit, Cue the Genius show with Liz Caruso, Michelle Bruno, and myself, Delia Elgazar. Welcome, welcome, welcome on this Thursday, whatever time zone you're in, whether you have coffee with you, cheers, whether you are day drinking, nobody's going to know the difference, or you're having an evening cocktail. So we are talking today about event professionals, or actually any professionals, to be honest, and imposter syndrome. Um, I've noticed recently that it is bubbling up quite a bit on LinkedIn, on social media, actually, even at events right now when it comes to professional development. It is a session that is very well attended. And Bruno, if you remember from PCMA convening leaders, actually, it was like standing room only. Majority were female, I would say. And it was just very apparent that it was either a time where people wanted to share with them. Hi, Karen. Hi, Sean. Wanted to share what they were going through as imposter syndrome, because we truly think that it takes different forms and, you know, traits, if you will, with different people, depending on where they're at, as well as to learn from each other. The most common thread is they wanted to know that they're not alone in feeling it. So we're going to start off with defining what imposter syndrome is, or what you think about it. And Liz, I'm going to start with you and then Bruno.
Okay. For me, I think imposter syndrome is when you take on a project or something that you're doing and you don't feel like you have 100% of the knowledge, and you feel like you're just like crushing it in that area. And so you're learning. And I think a lot of people feel like, well, if I don't know it and I'm making money from doing it, or I'm, building my career doing this, then, people are going to find out that I don't really know what I'm talking about. And I think it's that. And then also, I know for me, it's a lot of like comparing what you think you should know to what you actually know. And a lot of times I realize there's a huge like difference between those two things.
Mhm.
I've watched many people who clearly don't have imposter syndrome go into a room and talk up something big that they can do. And in the back end, I'm like, you have no freaking clue what you're talking about. They don't care. They make tons of money. And a lot of times they ruin the project. They just like literally don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And so I think it's finding the balance between like being like that and then this creative curiosity that I know we'll talk about. It's okay to like find something that's, 10 or maybe even 20% out of your lane and figure it out along the way. I mean, that's what entrepreneurs do all the time. Everyone in their business does it all the time. But I think that's where a lot of people, you kind of like are holding yourself to this standard, even though other people might not be holding you to that standard at all.
Yeah, definitely. Bruno, what about you?
I'll be honest, when I think about imposter syndrome, and I'm not downplaying it, I know it's real. I've talked to coaches that have clients that have imposter syndrome. It made me think of like filling out a quiz in Cosmo magazine in the 80s, like, are you a good lover? Or online, like, are you an alcoholic if you check, more than 5 boxes? So I don't know. It is a concept I do not personally understand, because if you feel uncomfortable, going into it, just learn as much as you can. And the rest is kind of like it is up to fate.
Mhm.
So I don't know. That's where I stand at the outset. At the end, I'll probably feel like a complete fraud, but at least I'll have a remedy.
There you go. I mean, I think a lot of people, when they think of imposter syndrome, and maybe this is a moment of truth if all the listeners want to share in the comments if they've ever experienced imposter syndrome, either in a moment of their lives or right now as well. So we're going to share a couple of ways where you can squash it. My definition of imposter syndrome is someone who sort of puts a combo together mentally that it is all about luck, and it is about timing, that you are in the right, in that one time or space, or moment for sharing what you think you know. But the whole idea here is it's a mental conversation that usually happens. So, you can talk yourself out of your credibility or your expertise, or that you know what you know. And it's usually fed by that little voice that's in the mind. So, for example, I suffer from imposter syndrome, and it usually depends on different situations. So if it's a new audience and I'm taking the stage, sweaty palms, get up on stage, I would have visuals, if that would back me up, but I would still feel as if who's in the audience that knows more than I do. And so that sometimes still happens. It also happens when I like speak to clients or groups of people. So I do go through that mental conversation, the what if. It's a rabbit hole. But there is ways where you can see how you can trigger it so that you talk yourself up instead of down. I think right now, what is also happening, especially in our universe, the events universe, with the virtual and digital route that we went in with the Corona coaster in the last couple of years, the imposter syndrome sort of bubbled up quite a bit. People were just faking it and until they make it, because of job security, because they just wanted to appear that they knew it all. I like Bruno's approach about ask a ton of questions. So before we get into that, one thing is, how do you recognize someone that has imposter syndrome? What do you think are their traits or characteristics? And if anybody in the audience can chime in, that would be great. Liz, what about you?
I guess what I think of is someone who is like constantly ruling themselves out for opportunities that they'd be good for. It's one flag that I would look at. Another one, I guess, would be, well, I think just the way that they present themselves is always very like apologetic. And I mean, I think there's a huge benefit to saying, I've done this many times where I've spoken at some public speaking thing, and I've been like, I'm sure most of you in this room are smarter than me, at least on this topic. And I think there's like a benefit to doing that. And I think that's totally fine. But there are people I think who are just like to the extreme. You're just like, okay, you were hired for a reason. Act like you know what you're doing, so those are two of the things I think of. I don't know.
Bruno, what about you?
I
I
don't
know
know.
it's tough for you because you don't go through it, but like, do you ever recognize someone that might have imposter syndrome?
Well, I'm going to steal something that Liz said before we went on air, and that is, individuals that know everything about everything at all times and all ways. And you just look at them and go, how can that be? Nobody knows, and then they sort of synthesize it down into like some little, soundbite or quip. If there's anyone that has it, I'm thinking, you got it, because you're so overcompensating for stuff that you clearly aren't an expert on. So maybe you go back in the green room and go, shit, I didn't really know anything about that, but I winged it and they love me. And, the comments are coming in. So I don't know. Maybe that's somebody.
Yeah. I mean, some of the key characteristics or traits that you see people that are suffering from imposter syndrome. Leanne also said it here. Hi, Leanne. where it's they downplay their knowledge. So that's one. Bruno, Liz, you said, they apologize quite a bit, or they, try to seek their seat at the table, where they're like, well, I have an idea, like in a not in a bold way. And someone here, and I believe it's Jen Arturo, LinkedIn user, said it's truly about lack of self-confidence, which is definitely the case. And then Karen is presentation or misrepresenting themselves, especially if the listener knows that trade. So the ideas here is it's downplaying what you know. It's also like it's negative conversation within your mind or to yourself. So it's like if you keep using that same, comments of, well, I don't know what I don't know. People won't love me. People won't, respect what I'm doing here within this project, or around having this seat at the table, for example. Then that will kind of show up as imposter syndrome, in my opinion. Nick, hi Nick, thanks for joining us. Nick says, I think people with less privilege are more likely to experience imposter syndrome. As a white cis male, people are primed to believe me. I don't have to overcome anything, which is true. So the imposter syndrome, and I think this is when, when we talk about like DEI or inclusivity, we really have to take a look at it like in a deeper way within the workspace as well, especially if you're working with remote team members or new team members that only show up on a virtual screen versus in person, because I think that lends itself as well to, how they are dealing with their own credibility, their own knowledge, and speaking up. I honestly think, what do you guys think of the idea of, imposter syndrome, or like from a professional development, that is something that it should be served by HR or by, leadership team within the workspace these days?
I mean, that they should take measures to try and mitigate it for you, or
not mitigate it, but like to give you the tools you need or the space you need to discuss it.
I mean, for one thing, it's almost counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Because it seems to be a sort of a very personal thing where you're afraid that you don't know as much as you're supposed to know. So then I'm imagining HR coming in and going, "You're right. You don't know what you're supposed to know. I'm calling you out, but I'm here to help." I don't know if that would be helpful. It would have to be somewhat on the down low.
Yeah.
In order to be, because it's like it's based, it seems, in fear and, fear about, I guess, failure, right? And so if someone says, yes, you have failed, I will now officially recognize that you are a failure. You don't know your shit. Is that helpful? And I don't know what the tools would be for that.
So, Liz, what do you think? Is it something that should be offered? Maybe not from HR, so that, like Bruno says, that you don't call people out on the shit that they don't know, but do you think it should be offered as professional development?
I don't know. I mean, I guess the challenge for me with imposter syndrome has always been that it seems to be about, as someone pointed out earlier too, it's about confidence. It's about how you feel about what you know. It's not about competence, right? So like there have been many times where I've watched someone who's really confident take on a role that they really shouldn't be taking on. And they really don't know what they're doing. And I've watched other people just kind of like almost bow to it, because confidence does give you a spot in the room and at the table. But I kind of like personally pull back from wanting to just tell people, like, just be more confident, just go in there, even if you don't know what you're talking about, and just like own the room. To me, that's kind of like, I don't know, that's solving the problem. So I think it's clearly something that a lot of people feel. And so I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be talking about it in organizations and in professional development sessions. There should be something around there, but I guess I'm just trying to figure out, like, what's the angle?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, competence, I mean, one kind of follows the other, right? I think if you are competent, that eventually you will have the confidence about that. So maybe the angle is, let's make you as competent as you can be, and you will naturally, hopefully, feel, or at least have the chance to feel more confident around it. And also give them the space to, you know, fix it for themselves. Like give them the literal time off or places to go to become more competent so that they then feel, you know, better about how they are. But if it's all about, you know, I'm going to fake it till I make it because I don't either really deserve it, or is it about it's really all luck? You know, the fact that I'm here right now is just luck and fate, or, you know, a higher power or whatever. That I can't buy into, so I don't know what the remedy would be.
Well, so one thing that I've been thinking of is, you know, and several people have said that in the comments, as well as Liz, you mentioned it as well, is the idea or you comparing yourself to others. So that whole comparison of, does someone in the room know more than I do? Or what if, you know, someone does it in a different way or is more vocal than me, for example. That whole comparison thing definitely has to be addressed, whether it is someone who can do it on their own or needs another peer or another mentor coach to help them through that. Because the whole comparison of you comparing yourself to others, whether it's in an audience, in your team, leadership, etc., that will lend itself to what sort of like tactics you're going to take to put the kibosh on your own imposter syndrome. And you know, the I think the other thing that can happen, I usually do this, is, you know, going to peers and asking for their perception of you. So you don't have to go to HR, for example, if you don't want to do that, like Bruno was saying, so that they don't call you out on your shit. But like, you know, if you go to a peer and you say, how am I doing? Or like, what can I do different? I think that lends itself to some sort of getting feedback on how you are perceived. And if it's something that you need to work on, if they tell you something that is, you know, something that you can work on, that's that's constructive feedback, in my opinion. Or it is also could be that it's validation. Yeah, you do know your shit. And yes, you do, you know, deserve the seat around the table. So just own it, you know. So the confidence sort of comes back in a way, if that makes sense. What do you think?
You know, my hope is that every room that I step into is full of people that know more than me. You know, it's like,
You're a
"Ooh,
unique
this
person,
is like a
Bruno.
bucket full of joy. I'm just gonna, you know, ask a lot of questions and I'm gonna figure out, you know, like what I don't know." This sounds to me more like, you know, the world that we've come to know as being defined by others. And social media, I've got to think, plays a big role in this. It's like the other
Definitely.
side of FOMO, like being excited about being there where all the cool people are and, you know, all the fun ideas are, you know, is now to feel like I don't want to be in that room because I don't deserve to be in that room. And, you know, why are we devaluing ourselves? You
Yeah.
know, um, yeah, I'm starting to get like pissed off here, you know. I want to all those people that are feeling this way, let's have a chit chat because,
Let's
you
do
know,
it.
we're supposed to be leaning in, you
Yeah.
know, as women and as human beings, or I understand it may be completely different for even more marginalized groups, but we've just got to bust through, you know. I'm going to
And
stop there.
no, don't stop. So it seems like our comments are on fire on this one, or am I mistaken? What?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Let's
Hi,
see
Mary
here.
Pat.
Yeah, like
Uh,
Karen.
and
I'm the first
Karen
one to say
and
I don't know it all.
so go in and listen, learn, and have fun. Yes, that's actually the right. But see, this is where this whole competition with people that know more, the social media, etc. That's where imposter syndrome. One huge way of getting rid of that is just reaching out and asking the questions, or reaching out and then validating that if someone else knows anything else about this topic, chime in. Like, it's almost like a co-creative way of communication. A lot of people are not used to that because they want to be alpha. They want to be, owning the conversation, not having it be a conversation literally with others that are involved in it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Jim
I think
Keller
social media
too.
does play a huge role because everyone is putting this like perfect picture
Mhm.
online, whether it's personally or professionally, and it looks like, oh, you're speaking to like these huge audiences. Or I saw a post recently of a mom blogger, and like one of the questions she was answering was like, how does your house always look so perfect? Because you're always looking at these people. And she like panned the camera and it looks just like my house. I was like, oh, thank God someone else's house looks like my house. But from a professional standpoint, I don't see many people doing that part, saying like, I don't know it all, and I'm learning and I'm creating space. I saw Nick's comments about like just curating conversations so that you're learning alongside everyone else. A lot of people don't do that. You're just out there trying to look like you know everything, and then everyone is judging against that standard, which doesn't even really exist.
Right.
Definitely complicates things.
But the standards and the competition, and I think Borelli said it, is with oneself more than anything. So this is where the you have to flip the script, in the sense of those negative conversations. You have to figure out a way of how to get rid of them, and then you turn that negative into positive commentary to oneself. Or, as Bruno says, ask the questions, be in a room with people that are smarter than you, but have that be part of, flipping the script, if
I
that
mean, if
works.
you ask enough questions in the room, when you walk out, you know as much as them, at least enough to, move on. Can you pull up Jill Brown's comment?
Yeah.
I
Hey,
like this
Jill.
because I thought about this a lot. Is it different if you're sort of a freelancer or solopreneur where you don't have like the company infrastructure around you to support you in any way? And I don't know, maybe that helps people not feel like an imposter. I mean, A, you can't because you got to earn a living. B, if you don't know it, you learn it before you go in and pitch yourself. And C, you got to say, this is what I cost if you want me. I know I've worked hard to be able to offer my services at this price level. And if you don't want it, that's cool.
And collaboration being another part of that. I mean, there have been many times where a project comes along my desk and I could do 70% of it, but there's a part of it that I'm like, I don't know, I don't have that much experience. And then I'll think through my list in the network. It's like, well, Dahlia and Michelle have that experience. Let's see if we can work together and bring in, which helps you then charge what you should be charging because of the collective wisdom and not lose the jobs. I mean, I think a lot of people are like acting like they know what they're talking about just so they don't lose the gig because they need the money, but there's
Yeah.
other ways to do it instead of just pretending like you know everything. That's where I think partnering, and yeah, it's hard with type A personalities, as Jill was saying, to find other people that you can work with, but so
That's
important.
a fact.
So
I
so
just
do
I
you,
just called Dahlia for that 30%.
Me
And
too.
Dahlia, do you know someone that has obscure knowledge of
one
this very
moment,
small
please.
niche topic? She's like, he's got it on like speed dial. Yeah. Oh yeah, Bob. Bob knows all about
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
but okay, so to that point, that is my way of dealing with my imposter syndrome. If
Yeah.
someone says, "Oh, I need to know more about the metaverse," yeah, I got someone who can help you with that, Borelli.
Mhm.
If you know someone that knows, I don't know what, yes, that's the way of that collective thinking. Um, One thing that I've been reading recently, though, even though imposter syndrome has a truly negative feel to it, right?
Mhm.
Is I was reading about Tanya Katan, and Tanya Katan has actually dubbed the phrase creative trespasser. So an imposter is someone who just fakes it, is in a spot where they think they do not belong. But a creative trespasser is someone who comes into the room and, yes, is creative, is endlessly curious, asks the question, and then finds out where their superpowers, because we had this, webisode, was it last week? It feels like ages ago. Last week, our superpower, webisode. Then you take your superpowers and creatively think how it's going to work in that space or scenario or situation that you're in collectively with others. And then you're gleaning off of their superpowers, their knowledge, their IP, their intel. I kind of like the term creative trespasser versus, someone who thinks they are an imposter. What do you guys think?
Oh, okay. Can we just back up? Are
Bruno's
we
on a
talking
roll
about
today.
people that are in there and faking it? Or are we talking about people that are quality, knowledgeable experts, but feel that they're a fake? I think it's the
Good point.
latter because
Yep.
you shouldn't be faking it. If you want an opportunity, know your shit, go in there and kill it. But if you do know your shit and you go in there and you kill it and you get negative feedback or whatever, then I get that. I get feeling bad, and I get, feeling that it's, I did all this work and I didn't live up to the standards that I set for myself. That's a different matter. So
Mm-hmm.
that's how I answered that question.
Liz, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's about, Dahlia, you mentioned earlier, like listening to other people. I know when I first got asked to speak in public, my coworkers from Columbia University, where I started my career, still laugh at me all the time because it used to be like a team meeting of 20 people and I would be like shaking and I can't. But when they first asked me to speak publicly, I remember thinking, well, I can't do that. That's not a skill set that I have. And I talked to Jeff Hurt, and he was like, look, Liz, first of all, you're going to charge a meaningful amount because that's what people charge. And you have expertise that commiserates with that kind of rate. I remember it was like 5 times what I was thinking I was going to charge. And I was thinking, no one will say yes to that. And then, he said, what you have to remember is that you know the topic. So you don't necessarily know speaking, but that's a learned skill. And you can go out and practice and you can learn and you can read. And that's exactly what I did. And then I had to listen to the feedback because as soon as I got off that stage, I was like, oh my gosh, that was so embarrassing. That was horrible. I was thinking all those things. But I had to hear that feedback. I had to see the positive, and to Michelle's point. So it wasn't something that I had no clue what I was doing and I just like bombed. But I had to, it was like taking a step of faith with some work. I mean, not just like jumping out. But then I had to listen and I had to say, like, okay, people really liked it. So the next time someone asked me, I had to rely on that enough to do it again. Because if it was just based on how I felt about it, I would have come up with 1,000 reasons why it wasn't good enough. And then over time, doing that 50 times, 1,000 times, I've learned that it doesn't matter if I sound like X keynote speaker, if I tell stories the way, this other person does. What matters is that I have my own style. People are hiring me for that. Clearly, hopefully they know who I am. I know what I know. And that has to be like the confidence. I get it more from hearing other people's response than from just like feeling that way. That's not just coming to me.
So, so we're hearing that in order for you to get rid of imposter syndrome, that it is about collaboration. It's about asking the questions. It's about the self-confidence and how you build that up. And so this goes also back to asking the peers or your even team members, partners, what their perception of you is about, but then truly putting that feedback into motion, and taking that in. And also, I still think it's getting rid of the negative script that you have within your head. So David actually asked, what if the leader has imposter syndrome?
The leader of your
An
organization.
organization. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. That's okay. That's on him or her. That's what I say.
But what do you think that how does that impact the team they're leading?
Not necessarily. It just seems like a feeling that they have, and yeah, I think we're conflating this with, you know, being a bro or something, you know, like going out there and just like talking out your you know what, and you know, not really knowing your stuff, but they got to be a leader somehow. Even in a startup, they had a brilliant idea or partnered with someone that had a brilliant idea, and they got to where they are for a reason. So I think people, you know, everyone should respect that. Now, if they're a jerk, that has nothing to do with being an imposter, in my opinion. That's a character trait that they're going to lose employees and people, and they're going to have to deal with that on their own.
So I think Leanne, yeah, Leanne just said, you know, IP has no hierarchy. Leaders need support. Borelli says the same. Leaders need support, and yes, they are vulnerable as well. All right, so I guess we're at the 30-minute mark, but it seems like this is kind of a very chatty group today. I don't know if I want to let them go, but I think we need to. Maybe there's a follow up on this, or maybe there's, you know, a part 2 to this, more of a peer-to-peer discussion. If anybody wants to chime in or would like that as a part 2, please let us know. So we're looking for topics for the next couple of weeks. If you do want to chime in on what you want us to chat about, or if there's any challenges that you're going through at the moment, or any great like topics, just help us out. We also are looking for lifelines for future sessions as well. So please visit us at dahliaplus.com/cuethegenius and tell us what you would like to chat about. And hope you join us for a next show next Thursday. So every Thursday, just mark your calendar, put it on repeat, 9:30 Eastern on Thursdays. And please invite your friends so that we can all be chatty chat together. And I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, long weekend. Take care.